We are already one player down in this year's 50 most relevant. Did you enjoy yesterday's seasonal launch with Mini? We'd love to know your thoughts about that. But day 2 of the 50 most relevant brings us to our first collaborator of the 2026 Fantasy Footy preseason. And what a way to kick it off. Because on today's episode, we're talking about Sam Draper. And if we're talking Brisbane Lions, there's only one person in the Fantasy Footy community that I go to get a take on him. He is still running the back-to-back victory laps of what happened in September. DR from the SuperCoach Swordplay gang. Hello, mate. Nice to see you.
MJ, always a pleasure. Yeah, still on a bit of a high from the double grand final win, but absolutely stoked. It's always a pleasure and an honour to be here for what is really a SuperCoach institution, the top 50 most relevant. So cannot wait to get stuck into our new recruit, the big boy, the new cult figure, Sammy Draper.
Sammy Draper is who we're talking about. Got ruck forward eligibility. That is going to be something we are going to have to talk about on this episode. Hugely valuable piece of versatility and flexibility that sits inside the game. He's coming off a seasonal average in SuperCoach, a career best of 91.6, and he's going to set you back at the price point in that format of $396,600. While over in the AFL Fantasy format, an average of 82 sees him priced at $731K. And while the averages look great, the game stats doesn't, because he just got the 5 games away for us last year. A seasonal high last year in AFL Fantasy for his side was a 101, while it's a 103 for the Giants. It was his career high score back in 2023, while over in SuperCoach, it's a 110 was his top score last year. 126 is a career high score for him in SuperCoach. You got to go back a couple years now, 5 years technically, in 2021. DR, he's always been this kind of someone. I know he's near and dear to your heart now. Maybe 6 months ago he wasn't. But he's always been this kind of guy in the SuperCoach community, probably especially. We've all anticipated this breakout season. We've seen moments and spurts and quarters and games, but never really got any sort of continuity. But last year, while it wasn't for as many games as we liked, we started to see this move from a hoped to a potential fulfilled reality that Sam Draper could be a fantasy footy relevant option for us.
Very frustrating because it was time. It was time for this man to go bang, break out for us. And unfortunately, we've seen it too many times over the past 5 or so years. Broke down yet again. The body let him down. This is the huge red flag here, mate, with his durability. But if he can get his body right and actually stay out in the park and continue on from that form last year, I think that he could potentially push a triple figure average this year. I know that we're expecting a fair bit, but there's a lot of changes this year. He's in a different environment. So I'm pretty keen on the pick. There is a lot to dissect, but durability, can he actually stay in the park, mate? That's a big question.
That's it. 15 games over the last 2, real barely. In fact, I think he's played 15 games twice over his entire career. Like, it's just ridiculous, the lack of availability that he's had. But when we dive into where the growth came from last year, he had a real jump in his handballs. He went from an average of 2.5 up to a 6.2. His goals went from averaging 0.7 a game to 1.4. And it was his tackles as well, another really critical piece that from a pure statistical element, again, in SuperCoach, there's some more weighting with the handballs to receives, those contested marks, those timings of goals, things like that. But his tackles went from not even averaging 1 a game up to knocking on the door of 3. So that's what brought that AFL Fantasy average up to that 82. That 101 was a season high score, as well as a 95 and an 88. If you want to know the other 2 games, fine. 67 and 59, so not great. While SuperCoach, that average of 91, 110, 105, 103 were those 3 big scores, and then a 72 and a 68. So not great. The benefit for us is in AFL Fantasy, he's priced at 70 after averaging that 82. So again, priced a little bit more historically at what he'd been, while in SuperCoach, he's priced in that 73 sort of range. Again, about 20 points per game down off what he actually did last year. But DR, I've got so many questions I want to ask you about Sam Draper now that he's sitting inside this Brisbane ecosystem, but I'll fire them away and you can answer them as you will. Is he actually going to be fit for round one? Because he's missed basically the entirety of the 25 season. How's he going to sit inside this Brisbane Lions structure? And they've had a lot of other additional changes that have hit that Brisbane side, including an Oscar Allen. Does a Darcy Fort still play? Does he sit 100% ruck? Those are just a couple of top-line questions I got. What's your take on some of those?
All right, a lot to unpack here. So let's go back to the start. Let's just talk about, will he be available for round one? This is a huge question that we need to answer. At this stage, the answer is yes. So they expect him to actually get involved in some preseason games and be absolutely ready for round one. So there's the first tick there. All good there. Secondly, where is he actually going to fit in this ruck lineup? Now, this is a bit of guesswork here, but what I've done is I've looked back at Brisbane's ruck splits all the way back from 2020 up to last year to try to work out how much time he's actually going to get in there. I've looked at our teams from last year. I've looked at our grand final team, how that stacked up. So this is what we'll start off with, I think, MJ. So we'll go back to 2020 with the Brisbane Lions. So let's go back and talk about what we did when Big O was really the main man in the ruck. It was Steph Martin, who was our big boy. Then the Big O came in, really took over that number one role, and he was our big dog basically from then on in. Went up to 82% in 2021, again, the key ruck. And then in 2022, Fort made his way into the side. Big O went down to 69% and Fort had 37% of the chunk. So that was a bit more of a split there. In 2023, the next year, Forty only played a handful of games and it was a Big O and Joey Danaher. So that was our most preferred ruck system, for the Big O to take the majority of the ruck and then Joey Danaher to take that extra bit of the split. It was great for Joey because if he was having a bit of trouble finding the ball up forward, he could get involved in the midfield, get involved in the game, get his hands on the ball, and that would generally lead to good things for us. Now, last year, the issue was that we obviously didn't have Joey Danaher. Big O was out, he was in, and Big O played 9 games with Sam Day being the other sort of ruck relief. So you'd think, MJ, with the fact that now Big O is out of the side, Draper will obviously take on his share, but with the Big O not really being involved last year, it was a bit of an interesting type split, and Fort was the main man. The question this year is, do they continue to play Fort in the side along with Draper, or do they go back to that Joey Danaher style setup where we have Draper, say, 80, 85% in the ruck, and then you have one of our key forwards chopping out? The issue is, our current key forwards that we've got, no one's really had a history of actually doing that. So when I'm trying to work out who that man's going to be to take that potential Joey Danaher role, there's no one that really stands out. Could it be an Oscar Allen who's just made his way into the side? Look, potentially. Or do they just go with Darcy Fort, even for the first month, just to make sure that Draper is right? They may be worried that he might not be able to run out a full game. So it's hard to tell at the moment. But one thing I can say is that Chris Fagan has said to Sam Draper, I see you as a pure ruck, which is interesting because in Fagan's eyes, he's brought Draper into the side to take on that number one ruck role. And I certainly think that that will occur, but I'm not sure if it will start right at the beginning of the season. I'm slightly concerned that they may ease him in a little bit more with Darcy Fort there. And we talked about his breakout season last year. One thing that was really interesting with that, mate, is the fact that his ruck split was the lowest that's been in his whole career. It was literally a 50% CBA average. So do we ask ourselves a question, does he necessarily need to be that big dog ruck to actually score really well? Or in a better team like the Brisbane Lions, can he still score well even if he has, say, a 60% CBA rate? That's something that we need to take into account as well. So a lot to dissect there with the rucks. What are you thinking, MJ, in regards to this ruck split? Do you have a bit of an inkling yourself about how they're going to ease him in and how much time he may get?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it comes down to how they want to structure up with those key forwards for Brisbane. I think Logan Morris is an absolute certainty they're going to keep away from that spot. Oscar Allen's probably got that physical presence to be able to do that a little bit more naturally than what a Morris does or a Gallup, if you were to look at those three. And Fort feels like a nice insurance policy to me to be able to cover into those spots. But as you've mentioned, Brisbane are in no rush over the first 4 to 8 weeks of the season to bank games, get wins, put themselves into challenging positions. They've shown over the last 3 years they can get to the last day in September, even having a really challenging front half of the year. They've brought all these recruits in because they know they need to be able to go again with new dynamics, new different elements, new structural pieces that they were able to kind of protect a little bit of a weakness last year without the Joe Danaher. They kind of made a forward line stick with a few variables not landing their way. With Allen and with Draper, it feels like secured that ruck spot a bit more long term, secured that support to protect Logan Morris, who's already a star of the competition. I know we use that term really loosely, but to be able to do what he's done in under 50 games is just an absolute freak of what he's going to be. So I think I agree with your summary of I think he's going to be more ruck than forward, but the quality of players around him, even if it was a more 50-50 split, is beautiful. And I think where the growth came from last year was probably more the impact around the ground rather than the hit out element. I think the quality of players at his feet will help him in SuperCoach with the hit outs to advantage, where you've been previously dishing it up. And this is no shade on Caldwell, Durham, Merritt Parish, but these guys aren't Ashcroft ×2. They aren't McCluggage. They aren't Neil. They aren't Dunkley. Some of these guys are multiple-time premiership players, Norm Smith medalists, Brownlow medalists, like absolute all-Australian level caliber, arguably all of them, whereas it's probably Parish when fit and Merritt. So I think the quality of side he's in the midfield will help. The quality of ball when he does rest forward will help. So this is where the potential growth curve we saw last year, albeit 5 games, can probably give coaches some confidence that this is going to evolve and continue on in this new ecosystem, let alone, as you've said, how Brisbane have historically under Chris Fagan coached. But where do you pick him best? Because there's great flexibility with ruck forward. There's even more available to us in SuperCoach with flex. And there is some uncertainty around in the community too, DR. I don't know if you've got some reflections on it. With the new ruck rules about what you can and can't do at those ball ups at centre square, it does present a new dynamic that has some uncertainty there. Do you think Draper is hindered or hurt or helped by these new ruck rules a little bit?
This is a tough one, and I think there's two sides to the coin here. The first concern is coming back from an Achilles injury, playing as a ruckman, hey, you need to leap for the ball, don't you, particularly with these new rules. So some people may look at that and say it's a bit of a negative because we're worried about that. On the other side of the coin, you look at his strengths as a player and as a ruckman, and I think that these new rules could actually suit him, with his agility, with his athletic ability. I think that these rules could actually bode well for someone like a Sam Draper, pretty good under his knees, everything like that. So it depends how you actually want to look at it. Do you look at it glass half empty or glass half full? I'm looking at it more glass half full at the moment, but I can see the concern there, and we will touch on it as well, durability. I don't know if you want to do it now, but
yeah,
if we take a quick look at this history, MJ, it's a little bit scary. So if we go all the way back, I'll get to my notes here. So we look at 2019 in the VFL. Tore his ACL in the VFL match, was out for 12 months, but they actually signed him on for a 4-year deal. So they were still keen to retain his services and saw a big future with Sammy Draper. In 2020, played the 8 games. That was when Bell Chambers was number 1 ruck, and he was pretty good. His body was fairly good there, so that's not too bad. 2021, 12 games, syndesmosis injury in round 2, out for 12 weeks, came back in round 14, but again, no consistency there in his season. 2022 was really the only season where he had no major injuries there, and he had a bit of a 50-50 ruck split with Phillips at times, but a decent ruck split overall. 2023, 14 games, issues with his hip, ruled him out for the remainder of the season after halfway through. 2024, only the 16 games, knee troubles, groin troubles, and then we look to that Achilles last year. So in his injury bag, we've got knee problems, groin problems, hip problems, ankle problems, and you can sprinkle in that ruptured Achilles tendon. So this is a big concern here, mate. I've just given you how many different types of injuries there to different parts of the body. Does the Queensland weather help him? I hope that it does. Look, we wouldn't have signed him on for a 5-year contract if we didn't have faith that he could get his body right and really play his best football at the Lions. But I tell you what, that is a big red flag here. But look, do we only need to get half a season from him? Will we take that? Could he do enough in half a season then just be able to move him on? Yeah. How lucky do you feel, Punk? I suppose.
Well, I think that's the risk profile element, isn't it, for you, is when a player is cheap, in contrast to what they've previously been able to do, which is what we're contrasting and comparing him really actually to, is the reason they're cheap is there's a variable reason that injury predominantly has got you there. So when you're looking at multiple injury impacted guys, it's about what's that risk profile of your side looking like? How high are you happy to take that? And then what parachute options do you actually like out of it? Now, in rounds 2, 3, 4, we're going to be sitting in best 18 across the format. So that's helpful. In SuperCoach, we already have one fall out of our best 23 on field anyway, and only 22 count. So there's some element of protection elements that sit alongside here for Sammy Draper for us. And even in AFL Fantasy, they've introduced the 50% injury threshold so that if a player gets injured mid-game and doesn't play up to 50%, well, your bench cover, if they're higher, jumps in. So you can protect some of these injury risks that sit alongside Sam. And then 6 to 10 games is exactly what because the reason you're looking at Sam is probably twofold. One is you're looking for who could deliver value on the dollar to return you some significant buying and points. So, okay, yeah, he's 20 points under what he can be historically of last year. Sure, there's the value. And then the second is you want to take that look at what it could do at R2, because there is some uncertainty what that contact rule at centre bounce might be, the freeing up of the sub. Do players, all of a sudden get a load spread? Do we see people playing more tools as a result to be able to manage things? There's some uncertainty. So a Draper gives you that look and see at those elements of who's going to really be R2, who's going to really be impacted or benefit from these ruck rolls, and who's going to give me the value. That's the appeal of Draper. And to get that in the ruck line, in the forward line, or even in flex in SuperCoach, where now the hit-outs to advantage can really get manipulated. You pair him with a Reedy, you pair him with a Duff Titler. All of a sudden, the narrative path that while the injuries are very real and very alarming, you start to go, I can counterbalance these concerns that are real with some protectional elements. And I suppose they are. Because he's now playing a part of Brisbane, he sits inside opening round. We'll get to see what he looks like in opening round, in round 1. And then probably for SuperCoach, this is of most benefit. With him being on the buy in round 2, Cats, Pies, Blues are also off. His price isn't going to move until round 3, where others are still on that bubble anyway that have only played rounds 1 and round 2. So maybe you take the look, see how Brisbane land, and then he becomes your parachute for somebody else. Maybe you were happy to do a premium in R2. Oh no, Grundy isn't Grundy anymore. He's regressed back to early 2025 Grundy. We'll jump and drop and roll and off you go. So we're not locked in as much as we thought we were, where we used to have 20 SuperCoach trades and everything felt like pure gold. We can be a little bit more strategic, I suppose, is maybe the nice way to say it, with how we use our trades and who and how we target our movements.
It's a great point. We get a free look in game. And look, usually in previous seasons, we need to rely on those preseason games, and then it can get to round 1 and all of a sudden you think, hang on, this bloke was playing here. What's happened? And it can give you a bit of false gold, I think, in the preseason games, but we'll actually get to see an in-season game. And that data is absolutely invaluable, and you can make a decision after you see that game. So that's a super point that you've got there, MJ. We are very negative at times about opening round when it comes to SuperCoach, but the advantage is for these types of players where we do have a few question marks around the pick, we actually get to see them in action. So we'll get to see if they actually pair him with Darcy for what that split's going to be like. So really good point there. And the other thing you touched on is the fact that he could be a fantastic structural cog to your SuperCoach side, depending on how you want to use him. I'm personally thinking of slotting him in the R2 slot at the moment because I'm a little bit unsure about the rucks. And then I've got the potential to even swing him forward, hopefully to get his body right as a keeper, and then have that swing in case one of the big two go down in a non-bye week where you need to play your 22, or as you said, chuck him in flex if you want. We've got Kalani White as that loophole option with the DPP swing. We've got Liam Reedy as well. So we've really got two options there with Reedy and Draper to add some flexibility to our squads. So really good points that you raised there, buddy.
So Draper brings with some baggage to our SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy sides, no doubt, but he showed last year in limited opportunities, health was the limit, that he can score. He's he is in a better ecosystem for fantasy footy scoring. He's got a better quality of midfield around him that will both help him when he's inside forward 50 and when he's leading the ruck. He'll give you flexibility and versatility within your squad to be able to save trades should he stay healthy, while also enabling you a structural cog to let you take a look at what the year is dishing up and who is now evolving into parts of new premium territories that you previously hadn't looked at. He gives you all these benefits and he brings with it some need to take some heart medicine too, because he has shown durability is not his friend. But if you're happy to take a look at opening round, like what you see, get your checklists off and know what it is about Draper that's got to get him into or out of your side, you should be able to enter into the start of this 2026 season with some confidence to identify whether or not Draper is right or wrong for your fantasy footy side to kick off in 2026. But DR, draft is a fascinating position too, because are people going to draft him as a ruckman? That feels a bit risky. Are people going to draft him as a forward? I don't know if it's like a 10-team league in SuperCoach format. Again, we draft at Coaches Panel on the Keeper platform where you can do some more customizations. If you're doing SuperCoach draft, it's a bit different. I don't want him as my on-field ruck. I'll put it that way in any format. But, you know, if it's a 5 forwards on field, like how high do you want him to be, DR? Like what's your take? Where would you be happy to field him in your drafts? Like I'll scrub the ruck option for you because you might be bullish on him and that's fine. But where are you happy to put him on field if it's as a forward eligible option?
I absolutely agree that you'd much rather him on field as a forward. I think it's risky getting there in the rucking draft. But funnily enough, he's priced, and this is not draft relevant, but as the 20th most expensive ruck. But if you look at the average, he comes up to 13 there as well. Yeah. So there is a little bit of value there if you look at it that way. But look, in regards to a forward, I'd be pretty happy having him as my F2. I think you'd love to have one of the bigger boys there, but or in regards to a round, is he a 4th to 5th round pick? Do you think,
maybe?
MJ? Am I going
it's SuperCoach, that'd be as early as you'd go. I'd love him at F3. I don't think I'd get him at F3 in SuperCoach, but I think that's where I'd love him. In AFL Fantasy, you'll get him at F4, I think. I know the forward lines are thin and people go reaching, so maybe it'll be an F3, but F3 feels like the sweet spot for me. But if you're bullish and if you're seeing him dominate that preseason, you're seeing him healthy and happy and strong, well, to get him at an F2 who could flip into your rucks to build that squad versatility where in draft you don't have that, well, I'll just trade him out for something of comparable value. No, you're heading into Mark Blitzarv's territory as your ruck. So you want to be able to build that flexibility in your squad where you can. So yeah, I can see an upside of F2 in SuperCoach for sure. I can see the upside of F3 in fantasy or keeper platform. And I'd probably always drop it back around to be able to hope I could get him. But he's going on draft day and they'll just take one bullish person and all of a sudden he's away. Hey, mate, I always love talking fantasy footy with you. Now, this is the third year we've collabed. 2 years in a row, your boys have got the cup. So you're welcome, Brisbane. Three-peat is done. It has been sorted on the 2nd of January. We've got it all done. Hey, mate, I know you and the gang at SuperCoach SuperPlay are going to be really busy throughout this preseason. You're already dropping content over the last couple of days. Where can we keep in touch with you? And what have you got planned for the SuperCoach community this preseason?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on again, MJ. You are a good luck charm. We're hoping for the three-peat this year after this video, but always a pleasure, as I said in the intro, mate. You're a fantastic bloke, and they're my favourite preseason series by an absolute stretch, the top 50 most relevant. But yeah, at the SuperPlay channel, got a lot going on. We're putting out our season guide again this year. All your team previews, we're going through every line, your mid-prices, your primos, your rookies. They're general type stuff that we all do around here, mate. But you can check us out at supercoachsortplay.com. And I've also taken over the ownership at supercoachtalk.com as well, which is a fantastic community to get involved with too. So lots going on, mate. Plenty happening on the coaches panel as well. And looking forward to seeing who is next in the countdown. Cannot wait, my friend. Cannot wait.
I'll give you all a clue in about 60 seconds time and see if you can decipher and figure out who it is. But if you want to find out more about DR and the gang and what they've been doing with the sort play, with SuperCoach Talk, everything like that, we've dropped all the links for them in the description of this episode too. So you don't have to go searching randomly through Google. We've put all the links for you in the description of the episode. So go in there, click there, make sure you follow, subscribe, support these guys. They're absolutely innovative, some of the stuff they've been doing in the SuperCoach community. Again, maybe your AFL Fantasy is where you choose to play. Still go in and subscribe as well. We know the community is stronger when we support each other, when we encourage each other. So friends, please jump on over and do that for them as well. Inside the description of this episode is also details where you can get in touch with us across social media, become a Patreon. And if you're a premium or a breakout tier supporter, you actually get a whole ton of rewards year round. But during the 50 most relevant, you get them a day ahead. So they already know who's at number 48. The clue yesterday, they were like, that was Sam Draper. I already knew it just when y'all were listening to the first episode. So stay ahead of the pack and become a part of our Patreon. All right, you ready to have a clue about who's at number 48? Let me tell you this. If you're starting a premium, you need them to fire out of the gate, don't you? You need them to be a guy that in the classic formats can not just hit their price point and hold that financial value in your side, but you need a guy that can get on runs of monster scores, put on back-to-back 130s, 140s, 150s. Well, in this player's defensive line, there's not many that can put out the ceiling and the frequency of ceiling that this guy has. Yeah, we're getting into the primos early this year in the 50 most relevant. Who is it? Well, you can comment below if you're watching this on YouTube and let me see your guess. You can become a Patreon and find out immediately, or you can just wait till tomorrow on the 50 most relevant.